Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. All right, so you're watching at the same time I am. That is Wall Street right now. And here's your headline. Stocks continue to tumble today following President Donald Trump's very tough talks about tariffs. Tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. They took effect overnight, and here is the effect of that right now. Americans wondering what this means for their savings. Maybe today is not the best day to look at your 401k. World leaders are also responding with tariffs of their own. So this index that you're looking at, along with the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, all slipping amid fears of a trade war, So let's bring in Barron senior markets writer Paul LaMonica. Paul, let's break this down. Walk us through what's happening in real time for people who may not understand the complexities of the Dow. One thing we all understand is that negative symbol.
Yeah, the Dow, S&P 500, NASDAQ, those are the three main barometers of the stock market, and they are all read extremely lower today. And that, continues yesterday's slide. Investors are worried that President Trump is actually carrying out the threats. There always, I think, had been a hope that a lot of this was public posturing, negotiating tactic, and that at the end of the day, there would be either another extension with Canada and Mexico, like we saw a month ago, or maybe even an outright agreement to not have these tariffs. But here we are today, and President Trump is showing that he is serious, not just with Canada and Mexico, but also with China. And the big concern is that this could lift consumer prices at a time where inflation is still a major worry for a lot of consumers and investors. And there's the question of, what do companies do? They either have to raise prices, which no one likes, or they eat the cost themselves, which hurts profits, and investors don't like that.
Right. And I just have to ask you about this because we know you at Barron's look at money. That is primarily what you talk about. And leading up to this, tariffs were sold to the American people on the campaign trail and then after the election as a way to increase our economic stability. But today, Vice President J.D. Vance said these tariffs were to stem the tide of fentanyl coming into the United States from Canada and Mexico. From your vantage point, is this about money or is it about drugs?
It's a tough question. It does seem as if the White House is using the threat of tariffs to try and get some policies and concessions from Canada and Mexico that aren't purely economic in nature. And that is concerning. The other thing I think that, consumers need to keep in mind is that even though the president and others in the administration like to talk about how this is something that countries pay, it really is, as you pointed out, something that consumers pay in the form of higher prices and something that investors pay with their 401k balances going down as the stock market falls because of worries about corporate profits. So this isn't something that is hurting exclusively Canada, Mexico, and China. There's a ripple effect, and a lot of American savers, consumers, and investors are being caught up in this as well.
Well, if I'm paying more for lumber from Canada or other goods from Mexico and China, I'm reducing the amount I'm putting into my 401k. We said off the top, today might not be the best day to check our 401k. So let's talk about just really the brass tacks, what Americans down on the ground care about. And that is, can I save for the future? What is my 401k going to do for the long term? Talk to me about savings and investment savings.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the key on days like today, and we saw it during the COVID pandemic, early 2020, what happened in the stock market. For those who remember what happened in 2008, the banking collapse, there are going to be times where the market is going to fall precipitously, and it is going to feel very, very scary. But you don't want to panic, because if you stay with stocks over the long term, they do tend to come back. Now, if your retirement is, years away, that may give you a little more cause for concern. But if you are young in your career, just starting out, do not use this as an excuse to sell stocks. You want to take advantage of those proverbial dips, because the market does tend to grind its way higher over time. And the good news is that corporate America is still healthy. Consumers may be worried about inflation, but they're still spending for the long term, and that should boost corporate profits and hence stock prices for companies like Apple, Microsoft, the so-called Magnificent Seven of the S&P 500, but also companies in many other industries outside of tech.
Talk to me about timelines. You know, we're hearing about all of these potential impacts. People who are not necessarily politically motivated, economists, are saying that the impact could be felt by the American consumer very soon. When do you at Barron's feel like the American consumer may be buying lumber, maybe paying for a house a little bit more, or one study today said $12,000 more per car? How soon could we feel those effects?
Yeah, this could happen, over the next few months as we see the potential retaliatory tariffs imposed from Canada, Mexico, China. There are also worries that the European Union is next on Trump's tariff target list. So you could have companies in Germany, France, Italy starting to raise prices as well if there are tariffs. This will have ripple effects over the next few months. The hope, again, though, is that eventually President Trump may shift his economic focus to the other parts of his platform that he campaigned on, namely deregulation, lower taxes, more stimulus. That could help offset, although maybe not mitigate entirely, some of the negative effects of tariffs.
All right, I have another question for you, and it speaks to the fact that likely Americans will be paying more. If I'm a retailer and I see that the consumer is willing to continue to pay more, let's play this out. Let's say the tariffs go away. Let's say that they all of the extra money that is being charged to these nations goes away. Are retailers going to lower prices again to be congruent with what we hope is lower cost to the consumer, or will they just stay up there?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think that if you are a retailer, if you are a restaurant, a company like Chipotle, which has said so far that they're going to try and keep prices down, even though avocados may go up sharply because of the tariffs on Mexico, I think consumers are increasingly savvy because of the experience of the past couple of years with inflation that came out of the pandemic. I think many companies that would try and keep prices high may pay the price themselves, because I think there'll be a competitor that will probably look to come out and curry favor, get some goodwill from the American consumer and say, hey, good news, we're lowering prices. And if any of our competitors keep them higher, you know what to do. Don't shop there. So I'm hopeful that companies won't use the excuse of some of these potential transitory higher prices to keep prices higher indefinitely.
I hadn't thought about that, but this environment could create a space for a new kid on the block, so to speak, who says, hey, I can do it for cheaper. Come over and play with me. I want to get your reaction to this. Just a moment ago, the president posted on social media this in response to what Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had to say. Please explain to Governor Trudeau, he says, of Canada. By the way, these are the president's words about the prime minister. He calls him the governor of Canada, that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount. Exclamation point used there by the president. If that's not a trade war, I don't know what is.
Yeah, this is a trade war, plain and simple. Warren Buffett said over the weekend that he was worried that it would be a trade war and what impact that would have on the U.S. economy. I don't think there's really any way around it. Some of the president's sarcastic comments about Canada, the 51st state and what have you, I don't think that changes the economic reality, which is that you're going to see higher prices as a consumer and potentially lower short-term profits if you're an investor from some of the companies in the S&P 500 that, if you have a 401k, you probably have an S&P 500 index fund as one of your top choices. This is not really good news for anyone, frankly.
Right. And politically, the ramifications there are fascinating to me, because there's that old phrase, it's about the economy, stupid. This president elected overwhelmingly because people were very concerned about the economy. Thank you so much for that conversation. We appreciate it. Hope to see you back here on CBS News 24/7.